Hello and welcome. How does Saudi Arabia define social reforms and modernization? What challenges do reformers face as they try to change things? Under the leadership of King Abdullah, who has ruled since 2005, the kingdom has implemented major changes. Despite not being able to drive and having basic rights mandated by a male guardian, women do enjoy more opportunities in the workforce now, including the first ever female appointment to a government position. A co-educational university was built last year, and even the press has been granted more freedom of expression. But opposition groups argue that's not enough. Saudi women and other minorities still face systematic discrimination, and the media is still largely controlled by the government, and no real legislation has been enacted to ensure protection of fundamental rights. So today we ask, are the reforms in Saudi Arabia merely symbolic, or are they the beginning of unprecedented social and political change in the kingdom? Remember, you can call in with your questions and comments. You can send us an SMS or an email. Joining me to discuss these issues here in the studio are Lama al-Sulaiman, the first woman in Saudi Arabia to hold the position of Deputy Chairman of the Jeddah Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. al-Sulaiman says change should be ushered in carefully. Also here is Dr. Ali al-Yami, the Executive Director of the Center for Democracy and Human Rights in Saudi Arabia. Well, we'll get to our studio guest in just a moment. But first, let's connect with Saudi activist Jazeera al-Huwaider, who's joining us by phone from Dhahran in Saudi Arabia. Now, she's the co-founder of the Association for the Protection and Defense of Women's Rights in Saudi Arabia and has been campaigning to end Saudi Arabia's strict guardianship laws. She received international media attention after she posted herself driving in Saudi Arabia on YouTube, commemorating International Women's Day. Jazeera al-Huwaider, thank you very much for joining us. First of all, you've been blacklisted because of your activism, and I wonder, what does that mean? What are the consequences of that in the way it affects your daily life?
My daily life really is not affected that much, except, sometimes when I have, for example, where I work, my supervisor, when they are Saudis, most of the Saudis I had trouble with. Other nationalities, I wasn't having anything with them. So mainly at work, yes, I didn't get promoted. I am isolated in doing the same job. Of course, when I travel, also I'm always worried if they're gonna stop me. And another thing, I cannot be in any shows in any of the Arab media. It's not only the Saudi media. I am banned from writing since 2003 until today. So they try in different ways to keep me isolated from the society. So yeah, it is affecting my life.
Let me ask you how successful you feel your activism has been, and in trying to create some sort of change, but then also how you respond to those who oppose you. I mean, there are some groups who oppose you, such as one group called "My Guardian Knows What's Best for Me," who say that you don't really represent the views of Saudi women, and I wonder how you react to their views, that you're not in touch necessarily with the needs of Saudi women.
Of course, there are always a different group, with different opinions. But these guys, they were against my campaign when I was campaigning against the male guardianship system. But other issues like driving, like our right to keep our kids in case of divorce, even divorce cases, and also working, getting education. All these issues are, nobody can say that Wajiha is wrong in what she's doing, because all these decisions they've been taken from women. They are in the male guardian hands. So whoever is opposing that lady, I think she is she wants to show herself that she has a different opinion, but she doesn't reflect the society. I don't reflect the whole society, but I am at least on their side, on the side of those who are having no way out. They are trapped in this country.
Jazeera al-Huwaider, I want to thank you very much for joining us and giving us your perspective there. Thank you very much. I want to bring in the studio guest here, and Dr. al-Sulaiman, Lama al-Sulaiman, listening to what Jazeera al-Huwaider had to say, what's your response?
My response is that a lot of the things that Dr. Wajiha is saying I am of course for the allowing women at least giving women a choice to drive or not, because today with the workforce we're finding that the most challenging part of getting women to get to these opportunities, job opportunities, is the transportation, even though it's equal for the men, because everybody cannot afford, but we need public transportation, right, whether it's for men or women. The other thing is the male guardian issue that this group you were talking about. This is actually, we find it actually ironic that there is a group, and I don't even believe that that group does not want it, and I really do believe that that was done for fame. And because, I mean, there are issues about the guardianship that are not required. Right. Maybe some others might be required to a certain age, which I do believe that could stay, but all of these are negotiable.
And Dr. Al-Yami, when you hear that you know, what seems to be a division in Saudi society and how to move forward, do you get the sense of that?
Look, yeah, I mean, there is that. You have the conservatives and you have, but they are an average society. I mean, the overall picture that you hear from the Saudi government and its control media, which is totally controlled media by Prince Naif, is that this is our tradition, this is our religion. You know, this is every country in this planet have tradition. In India, for example, 1 billion people, has hundreds of languages and religions and cultures. It's the biggest democracy in this planet, and there are people who are opposed to things. The problem is the system. The system is not open enough. It doesn't trust the people enough. It's paranoid, and it is going to actually to do itself in the country, and unless it opens and share power with people like Dr. al-Sulaiman and al-Huwaider and millions of other Saudi men and women.
As a Saudi woman, what do you feel, what sort of progress do you feel is being made in the kingdom in recent years under King Abdullah?
Well, instead of speaking about what I feel, I think I am the symbol of some kind of beginning of progress and development for women. I was elected to the Chamber of Commerce in 2005 and re-elected again in 2010. Most of the people that elected me were men, because the majority until today of the people that are members of the chambers are men. This on its own, I believe, is quite a sign of
do you feel you have the same voice there? Because of course for many, and there are many who obviously respect and see the need for change, but you know, you may meet opposition as well. Do you feel you have the same kind of voice as the men in the chamber?
In the chamber, yes, absolutely. I feel I have the same kind of voice. Opposition is there. I cannot deny that there is. However, we deal with it, and hopefully it will change.
Is it that people are expecting too much change too quickly? Because Saudi Arabia is a well-established country with so many traditions and so much history. Maybe people are expecting it to turn around too quickly.
I disagree with that notion, and that is actually carried mostly by the government officials and by their apologists in the United States. The Saudi people, and I'm not talking about all the people, but there are enough educated people like Dr. al-Sulaiman and many other people who are actually a lot ahead of the government and its policies. And one example that I could cite now, and we'll probably get into this a little later, is the cosmetic election that took place in 2005, municipal elections that was mostly created because of the United States pressure under the Bush administration. These are documented facts. The people, even though it was pretty cosmetic, but the people were very organized. They actually built their tents and they they promote their platforms, and it went very, very smoothly. That's a good example of how ready people are.
So there is a sign that there's a possibility to change even more. Let me ask Dr. al-Sulaiman, we had an email from the USA, if I could put this to you, that came in from a viewer by the name of Abdul Khalik Alemau, who says, whether or not reforms in Saudi Arabia are moving at a suitable pace does not seem as important as whether they are moving in the right direction. Why should Saudi Arabia become a carbon copy of the Western secular model? And I wonder to what degree there is that issue of people outside Saudi Arabia expecting a change that is westernized as opposed to just modernized. Do you see a difference between the two?
A huge difference. This is actually where we start defining who we are. We try today to move towards modernization and not westernization, because westernization means losing one's traditions, culture, and identity. And I believe, like anywhere else in the world, we are proud of our traditions. I mean, it reminds me of my grandmother and my great-grandmother, and these are beautiful things I would like to cling to. However, what we need to understand is what we need are the tools to be able to move our society into a more modern. Modern means better systems for individuals where people can get their justice properly done. This just requires modern tools, whether you want to call them Western tools, or I would prefer to call them modern tools. Then we create our own paradigm depending on what we define as our needs. If we talk about equality, my definition for equality would be equality in the opportunities, where of course something like equity would prevail. Equality would not mean that men and women are equal, but it would mean that there is a complementary role for both men and women.
Dr. Al-Yami, let me ask you then, when we look at some of the tools that Dr. al-Sulaiman has talked about, what do you see as the tools that need to come into place now to create the right kind of changes? What's needed?
Dr. al-Sulaiman keep mentioning we have to decide what we should do. And the question is, who are we? If the people have absolutely no say in decision makings, changings, power, then that means we is a pretty ambiguous terminology. So what needs to be done is continuation of elections that started in 2005. Incidentally, King Abdullah actually cancelled it. It was supposed to happen in 2009, and he himself said it has to be postponed. So you have to share power with the people, and that is the first step you do, and it can be done.
Let me ask you a question from a viewer, if I may, Dr. Al-Yami. This is from Muhabbat Roshan Sumbravo, who says, the Saudi government has not done enough to protect the country from outside influences. It is hypocritical for the royal family to rely on the West and adopt its cultures. Now, is that the problem? Is the West held in too high an esteem in Saudi Arabia? Is it too much the model for reform? And to what degree is Western media influencing the change there?
Look, there is no way that the Saudi government or any government can censor the flow of information like this show, for example, the internet, the social media, which has changed the perception of the Saudi people. The Saudi government has failed miserably to respond to its people's needs. There is a tremendous amount of change within Saudi society, contrary to what the government and others say. Due to the flow of information, people are expecting a lot more. You call it westernization, modernization, is irrelevant. The people want change. The people are responding to the events around them regionally, globally, and within the country itself. So the government of Saudi Arabia, in a way, depends upon Western civilization, Western countries like this one, for its own protection. The Saudis are depending upon the West for their protection. In the meantime, they are telling their people the Western values are decadent and they are going to destroy our tradition and culture and Islam. That's the hypocrisy that this person is asking.
Well, Dr. Sulaiman, let me get a perspective from you on what you see as what's right and what's wrong right now in terms of what are the, for example, as a Saudi woman, what are the advantages of being a Saudi woman? What are the disadvantages right now? How can things change?
I've only known one thing is being a Saudi woman. I've never been anything else, so basically that's what I know. I've always lived in Saudi Arabia. I've never lived anywhere else, and I was educated in Saudi Arabia. So I went to Saudi schools, I went to the Saudi University, and this is where I have had a PhD from England, but I was an overseas student. So I've always been in Saudi Arabia. When I do talk about I worked as a biochemist on diabetes for 15 years. And what I did is I went around different villages, different cities and around Saudi to do surveys on diabetes. And things are not as complicated as I would believe. What I've just heard is I think people in Saudi Arabia are much simpler. Yes, everybody would like change. Everybody would like to have a better lifestyle. However, we want them, as I said before, we want better systems to be able to connect the people to those systems where people can get justice. This is, I think, now today is our priority. People need to understand what the processes are, what the regulations are, and how to reach to be able to get what is.
That requires education as well, so people know how to access them.
Absolutely.
Yeah? I'm going to get back to some more of these issues in just a moment. We're going to take a very short break here. When we return, what type of leadership will follow the reign of 86-year-old King Abdullah, and what chance is there that his successor could reverse any gains made? We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're discussing reforms in Saudi Arabia under the rule of King Abdullah. In the past 5 years under him, the country is making social and political changes. But will the future leader of the kingdom continue those reforms? Well, I'm joined by Dr. Lama al-Sulaiman, first woman in Saudi Arabia to hold the position of Deputy Chairman of the Jeddah Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And Dr. Ali Al-Yami is the Executive Director of the Center for Democracy and Human Rights in Saudi Arabia. As I get back to some questions here, Dr. Al-Sulaiman, there was an email that just came in, through SMS actually, from Algeria. And Mustafa Chivani says, no one talks about the rate of illiteracy in Saudi Arabia, especially between women. I believe it cannot be separated from the whole situation, especially with the position of women in that society. And we talked about education just before the break. How important is it, or how much progress do you see being made in helping people to become more literate when it comes to these processes and tools, and especially women?
Well, if we are looking at the statistics from the World Bank and other statistics, I haven't seen that Saudi Arabia's illiteracy is high in comparison to MENA region countries. So I don't know where the information comes. However, in education, yes, women in education, I've noticed that women entering into the education world, if you look also at the statistic, is very much close to the men. We even have 60% of our university graduates are women. So women and education, this is not women reaching education. This is not the issue. So I don't know where the information comes from.
Dr. Al-Yami, at least there are some steps with the co-educational university. King Abdullah has actually, for the first time, got men and women studying together. Now he's had to move the campus out a bit so he doesn't cause too much, contradiction in the society in the main cities. But at least it's a step forward, isn't it?
Anything that is a change, a step forward, of course. And look,
a positive step forward.
It's a step, whether it's forward this one or backward is irrelevant. I think it's for international consumption. It is 15 miles away from the closest city, Jeddah, the most liberal city in the country. That's because they want to keep it away from people, eyes, and faces, and it is interesting kind of arrangement. The overwhelming majority of the professors at the university are non-Saudis. All the administrators are non-Saudis. Most of the students are non-Saudis. So the overwhelming majority of the people of Saudi Arabia will never see that school, nor will it have any immediate or even the short-term impact on that country. But as I said earlier, any change is a good change. I'm not saying it's not. But I want to go back to the education system in Saudi Arabia as a whole. She's absolutely right, Dr. Abu, and I feel honored to be sharing this discussion with such an educated, intelligent woman. I know her before I met her, actually. And I know the circumstances she and people like her work in Saudi Arabia. I'm here in Washington, so I can't talk. The educational system in Saudi Arabia remains to be among the lowest in the whole Middle East and the Islamic world, and the Gulf itself. 90 or maybe 80%, let's be generous about this, 80% of the curriculum is unscientific, an unscientific curriculum, which means the schools themselves do not produce enough good, capable workforce, whether among men or women. Look, I happen to believe the only saving grace for Saudi Arabia is to empower Saudi women. And when we talk about what steps that should be taken, King Abdullah can actually decree women can work and drive, those who wants to work and drive, and it could actually stick because he has the power.
One thing, Dr. Al-Yami, is that at least the country does encourage Saudi citizens to be educated abroad as well. I gather that fees are paid, so Saudi people have access to funding for education to be able to go overseas and to get a broader perspective of the world. That's quite rare.
I agree also with Dr. al-Sulaiman. For example, Saudi women, 60%, as she said, of the university graduates are Saudi women. But ironically speaking, there are no jobs for these women, which is a very ticking bomb for the country and the system. It's what you teach people It's what you teach people is what makes a difference. Saudi school are not teaching people independence, self-reliance, sciences, exposure. It teaches them the same old traditional religious family history oriented courses. Even though you have schools and you have many people graduating from schools, they are not qualified to run the affair of their country.
Okay. Dr. al-Sulaiman, an email to you, if I could, from Syria that came from Samar Hafar, who says, the pace of change in Saudi Arabia is insignificant as long as their concept of change is incomplete. Sufficient freedoms will never be granted to the Saudi people in order to achieve real change. Is that concept of what is needed incomplete, do you believe?
Can I redefine a lot of things? That
Please.
I hear all these, all these comments. Interpretation for me is one of the most important things that is today challenging Saudi Arabia. We live in a very misinterpreted environment and also misunderstood. Whatever people's opinion is of the pace and how fast things are moving, we would all, and I think every Saudi citizen would love faster, and because everybody desires more. On the other hand, this misinterpretation causes some kind of opposition that no one is really clear to where is it that we are going. In my opinion, we should focus on the individual in Saudi Arabia, whatever the system looks like, and however, today we want better education. As Mr. Liami said, education is our priority. Yes, the education system needs to be reformed. It has been started. I have gone through a lot of workshops. One of the places where a lot of women are today participating, which is giving it more of a gender perspective, is that all the workshops that the ministries are having today, there is always women and it's important that we attend these workshops, because this is where the strategies and the plans for the improvement is going to come in.
Unfortunately, I have to stop you there. There's so much to discuss and never enough time, but I want to thank you both for taking part in this discussion. I hope we get to talk again.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us too. Now remember, you can follow our program on Twitter. We'll keep you notified on upcoming shows, and you can send us questions and comments for our guests. On the next show, one language to rule them all. The spread of global English language may be improving the way people communicate across cultures, but how damaging is it to the linguistic traditions of other nations? We'll take a look at the language some are calling Globish. Be sure to tune in for that. For me and the team, we'll see you next time.